Later, somebody has a different experience or a more expanded experience of enlightenment, which is, hey, this world of samsara, which is basically just the world we live in, this world of samsara is also nirvana. And it's inclusive. That means that ordinary, everyday people have a shot at enlightenment. Where did that come from? It came from someone, some man, some woman, sitting around, having an experience, seeing life in a way that didn't completely and absolutely jive with what they were taught. It wasn't discounting that, but like they just went to something a little more expansive, a little more inclusive, and went, that's a great way of seeing life. And so it goes. In other words, that it expands, that it includes, that even the experience of enlightenment itself isn't something that's just simply, the expression of it isn't set in stone. The ultimate reality will always be the ultimate reality, but it's the expression of it, including the experience of it, isn't set in stone. So if you took it out of Buddhist terminology, if it was in some Christian around there, it would be the Christian suddenly realizing, my God, that Christ or God isn't just this thing that's abstracted from the world, this wonderful abstracted state of consciousness I could get in where I'm just filled up with this divine presence that really doesn't seem to partake of this world, but is so satisfying that I'll just, breathe that in for the rest of my life. You can imagine a Christian all of a sudden, you can imagine their surprise, and there's a couple of wonderful, not only sermons, but there's also some wonderful poems where you can just sense the great surprise of seeing Christ in everything and as everything. Right? I often read this wonderful poem of this old monk seeing Christ as his hand, as his foot, and he goes through like this whole very human experience, and he's seeing Christ in all of it, in every little piece of it, and talking about how that vision suddenly made everything seem whole and forgiven and complete and forever redeemed, simply by seeing that from that perspective is like almost in an instant, everything that seemed irreparably damaged, that seemed unacceptable, that seemed cast aside, is immediately felt as being redeemed, whole, and complete, and you can see Christ in the very thing that you discounted the minute before. Same sort of vision, actually. It is seeing nirvana, God, in samsara, in a bunch of ill-behaving human beings. Right? Right? And the great healing of that vision. And the person who wrote this talks about the great healing, the almost instantaneous sense of redemption that came from seeing life that way. It's different from seeing life as an illusion. Right? It's not that one's true and the other's not. It's almost like reality, the infinite going, look at all the ways you can experience me. Here's one, here's the other. Which one's me? This one or this one? Yes. Which one? Both. Really? Both? Not only both, but add an infinite number more. Oh, geez, do you know? So at some point, I think when we get enough experience with realizing there are different ways to experience and see life and experience ourselves and experience whether it's a self or a complete lack of self, There's so many different ways to experience these things that at some point I think it starts to dawn. It certainly dawned on me years ago when I had these different ways that were all seemed to link together, but also had their little different permutations, you know. To experience absolute emptiness is different than experiencing absolute fullness. And experiencing emptiness or fullness is different than experiencing them both at the same time. And at some point I started to go, wait a minute. I'm starting to get that reality isn't just seeing things one particular way. Reality can show up in an amazing diversity of ways, even in more enlightened ways of seeing it. Which is an interesting thing to realize, because then it allows your consciousness to actually experience even deeper experiences of reality. You're not experiencing fundamentally something different, but different ways it can show itself. Right? And when this really starts to sink in a deep way, there's such an incredible relaxation with it. Because the me isn't scanning its experience constantly going, am I experiencing the right thing right now? There's something that gives way. And it's then a whole different kind of experience of freedom. Whole different quality to it. I think one of the benefits is that we can see all the ways that God wants to show up. Whether they're clear or diluted. I can still see the clear ways and I can still see the diluted ways. At least ways that seem clear to me are really diluted to me. But it does open up your ability for appreciation very, very wide and very, very vast. And I think in today's world, if we need anything, that's what we need. Especially to go along with all this connectivity and information we're bombarded with all the time. What's the underlying reality within it all?